Greetings, friends. I hope you can hear me. Just wave your hand if you can hear me. Okay, perfect. So unfortunately for you, I will be your MC this week. The MC had to apologize for something came up. It will take us just another few seconds to start. So, hello, my name is Omar Harami, and thank you for joining us for the latest Kumi Now online gathering, as we address the toll that the occupation takes on the lives of Palestinian children. Our guest today is Rifat Kassis, the founder of Defense for Children International Palestine. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that this session is being broadcasted live on Facebook and recorded. If you do not wish to appear, please turn off your video feed. We would also love it if you could quickly share one of the links that are being shared in the chat so that others may join. Today we have, I will be giving you an introduction or an update on what's happening on the ground. And for the people who haven't seen me previously on Kumi Weeks, my name is Omar Harami. I work at Sabil. I've been part of the Sabil family for over 15 years. And we have a special guest today with us. Many of you know him from Kairos, Palestine. Abu Dhafir, may you please introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Sabil. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Kumi Now, for inviting me for this session. My name is Rifat Kassis, as Omar said, and I am currently the General Coordinator of Kairos Palestine and one of its co-authors, as well as the International Coordinator of the Global Kairos for Justice Coalition, which exists in around 40-something countries, seeks to support the Palestinian right to self-determination. In 1991, during the first Intifada, as Omar explained, I founded DCI Palestine, a section of the Geneva-based movement. And in 2005, I was elected as the president of the global movement for 2 terms. I was also appointed as DCI General Commissioner for MENA region and co-founded the DCI movement in the Arab world as well. I am also elected president of the International General Assembly of DCI currently. Also, during the first Intifada, I ran the YMCA rehabilitation program, offering psychological care to traumatized Palestinian children who were affected traumatized during the Intifada by the Israeli military. And in the second Intifada, I founded the YMCA Joint Advocacy Initiative and the Olive Tree Campaign, which some of you might heard of it. In the past, I also worked for some ecumenical donor agencies in Central Asia and in Chechnya. I also worked for the World Council of Churches as the director of the EAPPI program. I think many of you also heard of it. And also I worked for the Lutheran World Federation as country representative in Jordan, working with the Syrian refugees. I have published 2 books and contributed to 14 different other books in different languages. If you want me to continue, Omar, I can speak a bit about DCI and continue to my presentation, or you have a different program?
We have a tradition of just sharing a very brief update on the ground on things that are happening. Usually focused on stories that are not usually that make it to the news, on the news. So if you give me a second.
Please.
So for many of you who received the Sabil weekly wave of prayer, we choose 7 to 8 praying points. And in addition to providing you an update on what's happening on the ground, and we try as much as we can to be as accurate as possible and to do further investigation with the wave of prayer. We also add prayer requests. But an update from this week, most people have, Gaza has been on the news, but people, I don't know if this story made it internationally, it made it to a certain extent locally. Immediately after the war ended, people went out to the beaches. The beaches have became full and life immediately went back to Gaza. And people usually don't focus on stories that that the people of Gaza want to live like everybody else. They want to enjoy the summer. They want to have a normal life. It is not that they are destined to be engaged always with within the Palestinian-Israeli struggle, fighting for our freedom. So I thought that this would give a different lens and the reality on what is happening in Gaza. Many of you have heard about Sheikh Jarrah. Usually it is whenever Sheikh Jarrah makes it to the news, it's because of a demonstration or an activity that is taking place. The Israeli police and army have been really tightening their grip on Sheikh Jarrah. Even journalists are not allowed to come in. Even if they find a way to get into the neighborhood, they are immediately removed or even imprisoned. There's something that hasn't been making it on the news. Many streets in Jerusalem, especially in the neighborhoods where they're under threat from settler movements, or witness daily confrontations between the army and the Palestinian people. A new phenomena has appeared. People have started to write poems, draw pictures with words that would encourage people to rise up. And it's a beautiful nonviolent action that I think does not make it into the attention of the media, and we'd like people to focus on them more. However, Israel, doesn't take nonviolent resistance lightly. There was an activity 2 days ago in Sheikh Jarrah, which is to fly a Palestinian, a paper kite and it had a Palestinian flag drawn over it. The army immediately broke into the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, arrested the people who were doing it, took down the kite and confiscated it, which sounded like very stupid because the activity was made basically for the children in Sheikh Jarrah. You know, something that would show the resilience, the power and the influence of nonviolent resistance. And immediately the army came in and arrested the journalists who were covering the story. So 2 journalists, they were just released earlier this day. They've been arrested for 2 days. But also in Silwan, this little boy, we don't have his name because it's his parents signed a paper not to disclose his name to the media. That's what we know. He was riding his bicycle and he had a small Palestinian flag on it, while an Israeli police car was passing by, and according to the witnesses, hit him over. And not seeking medical attention immediately to him, the kid was, who is less than 11 years old, that's not accurate information, has been detained for 2 hours. They refused to have an ambulance or doctors to attend to his needs. So it just shows just riding a bicycle as a little kid as a way of resilience, carrying the flag of Palestine, would get hit by a police car, you know, just to think about the violence. So there is a growing movement of nonviolent resistance, as always, but it is growing and it's taking a beautiful artistic and courageous perspective in Jerusalem. We hope that this would continue and continue to grow. And now we move to Rifat and to the topic of this week.
Thank you, Omar. Maybe just to give you some background information about DCI Palestine, as I am going to talk in their name this evening. DCI, it is the only child rights organization in Palestine, works on exposing the Israeli violations against Palestinian children and on mobilizing the international community to put pressure on Israel so that it abides by its legal obligations under international law and holds perpetrators of child rights violations to account. On the Palestinian level, because DCI also works under the Palestinian jurisdiction, DCI Palestine strives to create a protective environment that enables Palestinian children to enjoy their rights by bringing about necessary changes to the laws, policies, attitudes, and also the customs and the beliefs of the Palestinian community. In Palestine, you would always hear this phrase, our children are our future. This is a common idea, easily borrowed for slogans and sayings on which I suspect most people in the world would agree. In Palestine, this sentence is substantially correct, as the estimated number of children under 18 years of old is around 2,300,000. This is in mid-2021, according to the Central Bureau of Statistics. This means 44% of the total population are children under 18 years of old. Of course, in Gaza, it's a bit, the percentage, it's a bigger than the West Bank. In Gaza, it's around 47, 48%, and in the West Bank, around 42% are children. But our children, I mean, although they are our future, but they are also our present too. The problems they encounter, the challenges they face, reveal a diagnosis for the problems and challenges afflicting the society itself. 73 years into Israeli oppression, dispossession, and occupation, the state of Palestinians' human rights is grave, and the state of Palestinian children's rights is graver still. In a situation dominated by military control, violence, intimidation, fragmentation, and the basic rights to free movement, education, health services, and so forth, all Palestinians have seen their liberties constantly violated and denied, and children growing in this atmosphere, and all of the toxins it contains are the most severely affected. In general, when we speak about the violations of children's rights in Palestine, or anywhere else, for that matter, we are fundamentally speaking about the violation of their rights to be safe, to be protected and nurtured, to be taught what they need to learn in order to grow up healthy and curious and hopeful. For the Palestinian children of today, the travesty and the tragedy and the shame is that those rights are essentially non-existent. Palestinian children living in Palestine are like other children anywhere. They have the same needs and should have and enjoy the same rights. What distinguishes them from others, however, is the situation they face every day. They are living under military occupation, which affects all aspects of their lives and the enjoyment of their rights. And so their most important needs are for these rights to be fulfilled. The right to life, the right to freedom, including freedom from violence and discrimination, the right to adequate health care and education, and the list goes on. Palestine, as we said earlier, is full of young people who have been unlawfully killed, maimed, detained, ill-treated, tortured, who have lost a limb in an airstrike or by a sniper, who have been pelted with garbage by settlers as they walk to school, mainly in Hebron areas, and also in Jerusalem, who have been turned away at a military checkpoint and therefore prevented from accessing necessary medical care, who have seen their parents or siblings or neighbors humiliated or threatened or shot or blown up before their very eyes, or witnessed the destruction of their homes either by airstrikes or by bulldozers for reasons they don't understand and their parents don't know even. Palestinian children have constant feelings of insecurity. When heavily armed Israeli troops, for instance, invade Palestinian villages in the middle of the night, or seeking, to arrest children. And by the way, we should say around 3 children every night are being arrested by the Israeli occupation forces. So, and they come in the middle of the night to arrest them. Or warplanes, for instance, shelling and bombarding their areas. Children's feeling of safety and security is replaced with a sense of fear and isolation. The traumatic experience betrays the guiding principle of acting in the child's best interest as stated in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. The situation in itself is an unacceptable status quo, and it is getting worse. Not only are Israel's violations of children's rights increasing and growing more severe, but because there are no signs on the horizon to indicate that the international community will hold Israel responsible and work to end its impunity. On the other hand, the Israeli authorities have consistently failed to take steps both to prevent such abuses and to conduct independent investigations when cases of serious violations arise. This failure only serves to bolster the culture of impunity. When investigations were or are being conducted, indictments are few, and punishments, when they are issued at all, are absurdly light, often resulting in minor demotions within military ranks. As our talk today is about children's fatalities, it is important to mention that in the West Bank, child fatalities and injuries generally occur in the context of military incursions. Demonstrations against Israeli settlements, for instance, or the wall or land grab, or just like what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah right now, this forcible displacement, or as a result of settler attacks against Palestinian children. And this settler attacks is it's increasing in a drastic way. More and more we hear settlers attacking villages, attacking farmers and children, etc. While in Gaza, the majority of child fatalities and injuries are the result of Israeli attacks and full-scale offensives, which cause a higher number of civilian casualties, as we witnessed last 2 weeks. Needless to say that international law stipulates that locations typically used for civilian purposes are not legitimate targets in any military combat. And here I mean Israel and Palestine alike. Over the past weeks, Israeli forces have bombed and shelled homes, hospitals, schools in Gaza. The scores of civilian deaths are not collateral damage. They are war crimes. These are not collateral damage. For a child of 13 years old in Gaza, this is the 4th war he or she have or has encountered, and have been living their entire lives under Israeli siege and blockade. According to UN, international and national child rights groups working in Palestine, The first Israeli war in Gaza happened in 2008, 2009. It lasted 21 days, killed around 300 children out of about 1,400 Palestinians killed in that war. In 2012, the second war lasted 1 week long and left 33 children killed out of 174 Palestinians. In 2014, the third war lasted 50 days, ended with more than 2,100 Palestinians, including almost 500 children killed. And about 1,000 children ended in permanent disability. And around, according also to UN and Save the Children figures, around 400,000 children required psychosocial support. The latest war, of course, left 253 killed in Gaza, among them 66 children. I also should mention that 2 Israeli children who also killed during this war. Unfortunately, I think you heard this in the news also, that 11 children of those traumatized from the earlier wars, which were being enrolled in psychosocial programs to help them deal with their fears and anxieties. This program was ran and conducted by the Norwegian Refugee Council, the NRC in Gaza. These 11 children were killed during the latest war in Gaza. Mr. Jan Egeland, the NRC's Secretary General, commented on the killing, and I will quote, that aged between 5 and 15, the children died while they were at home and thought they were safe. They are now gone, killed with their families, buried with their dreams and the nightmares that haunted them. He added, "We call on Israel to stop this madness. Children must be protected. Their homes must not be targets. Schools must not be targets. Spare these children and their families. Stop bombing them now." And he concluded, the truth is that there can be no peace or security as long as there are systematic injustices. The siege of Gaza needs to be lifted, and the occupation of Palestinians must end. And if we are to avoid more trauma and death among children and new cycles of destructions every few years, this occupation must end. I end the quote. In Gaza and in the entire Palestine, we have today an entire traumatized generation. Fears the world, have a lot of frustration and anger, and a hidden desire for revenge. These innocent children were created this way by the Israeli occupation and apartheid. Israel is all the time in the process of creating a new generation of enemies. Of course, Israel justifies its actions with phrases like self-defense and says it does everything it can to prevent civilian casualties, where in fact tens, if not hundreds, of civilian apartment buildings were destroyed over the heads of its residents, including children, in the last war. Had these children survived the shelling, they and thousands of others would have continued to suffer the effects of the bombardment. More children need today immediate psychosocial support following the deaths of family members, injuries, or homelessness. This figure includes children fleeing attacks on residential buildings and driven to UN refugee shelters, were very little this last war, where intense overcrowding exposes them to other potential abuses, exploitation, and violence. There is no safe space in Gaza, no safe place. Furthermore, and according to UN records, many children in Palestine are traumatized and need immediate psychosocial support following their either imprisonment or airstrikes or deaths of family members or injuries or homelessness. Such psychological damage will continue indefinitely and will require lifelong medical and mental health care unless the international community and all ethical voices, like churches, for instance, and civil society, intervene to stop these illegal and brutal acts and hold Israel accountable for all the violations committed against Palestinian children. To do so, we need to understand the reasons behind the failure of the UN agencies, donor agencies, and international NGOs to ensure proper protection of Palestinian children from the political violence of the Israeli government and settlers. This may be attributed to a conceptual understanding problem, which is the way we characterize the situation in Palestine and Israel. So when we describe it as a place with humanitarian crisis arising due to a conflict between two balanced powers. We hear this in the news, on daily basis. It's a conflict between Palestine and Israel. Today, even it's a conflict between Hamas and Israel. So as if there is a misunderstanding between them. And based on this understanding, one would say the answer to this conflict is to provide humanitarian assistance and care services. So as simple as that. This, of course, doesn't reflect the realities on the ground, where a colonial settler occupation and apartheid practice systematic appropriation of Palestinian land and resources over the past decades, created first a range of different threats to children, and second, created countless challenges for agencies seeking to address these threats. So the proper response should be to frame what's going on in Palestine as it should be, a human rights and protection crisis in which efforts to deliver aid and support to people is not enough and must be accompanied by intensive and concerted efforts to advocate and lobby at the political levels. Finally, the future of Palestine and the entire region is very much linked and connected with the future of the Palestinian children. How many tiny bodies will pile up before the international community recognizes that? Whether Israeli officials openly target Palestinian children or provide weak excuses for their deaths, the injustice is the same. Any policy that disregards the value of their lives is already a criminal one. We people, loving peace with justice people, cannot and shouldn't accept such injustices. Nor can we accept any endorsement of the impunity they represent. We all should demand nothing less than the implementation of international law and justice for the victims. The Israeli occupation oppresses all Palestinians, but its crimes against Palestinian children are particularly egregious. It is for their rights, for their lives, health, safety, hope, happiness, and future that we must advocate together and act together. And thank you.
Thank you, Rifat. And and that's the purpose for Kumi, is to act. It's important to educate people of the realities on the ground and what's happening, but it's also very important to act and do something about it. So what we will be doing, I see Ryan has been encouraging you to write your questions. I will be asking them to Rifat. So we have the first question. Is it true that all Palestinians, including children, must be registered with papers with the Israeli government so that the government and military know precisely how sorry. Is it true that all Palestinians, including children, must be registered with papers with the Israeli government so that the government and military know precisely how many children will be struck if certain buildings are hit by bombs at night?
Honestly, I don't know, but what I know that the whole people registration is in the hand of the Israelis. So any birth certificate should be ratified by Israel, and any death certificates should be also ratified and issued by Israel. So the Israeli authorities, they know exactly the number of Palestinians, and definitely they have their own maps to know exactly where these people reside and how many they are here and there. Maybe not completely accurate, but since the registration of people are in their hands, they know for sure what's going on, I mean, in our areas.
A question. In the last 10 years, there has been many reports that have been speaking about Israeli violations towards Palestinian children. Did Israel make any changes to the way that they deal with Palestinians, with Palestinian children?
Very little and next to nothing. I can just give you one example. When I used to be the director of DCI, some years back, we did a report together with UNICEF. And in this report, which we tackled the issue of imprisonment of minors, imprisonment of Palestinian children. And we gave a recommendation that instead of going in military vehicle cars at the middle of the night at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, disrupting the lives of the whole neighborhood, creating all these fears, knocking at their doors, sometimes breaking even the doors to come in and arrest a 12 or 13 years child. We made a recommendation to UNICEF to put it in front of the Israeli authorities to summon a child if they want to investigate him, to inquire. Why shouldn't do this in a civilized manner, to summon the child and his parents to come to meet them the next day? Of course, at that time, we also gave recommendations that any interrogation with a child needs to be recorded, and a lawyer or the parents should attend, as it happens in any single country in the world. Unfortunately, I mean, these recommendations were not accepted, and they continued to practice the same methodology of arresting people. Sometimes we felt that there are some cosmetics. For instance, if I want to talk about children imprisonment, usually, or the practice is that imprisoned children will appear in front of a military judge. So Israel is maybe the only country in the world where it trials children and Palestinian civilians in front of military judges. So we said this is contrary to the CRC, to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and there should be a juvenile judge controlling and running the court. So what they did, that they appointed a military juvenile judge. So it continued to be a military judge, but they add that it is for juvenile. So such kind of cosmetics, or increasing the number of majority, the age of majority for children, but they continue their practices to arrest people at age of 12 years old. So I would say very little improvement happened over the past years.
As the violence continues on a daily basis, one cannot speak of post-traumatic stress because there is no post-traumatic. How to deal with that?
Yeah, Yeah, that's right. It is a continuous trauma. And you know, that's why this is what we keep telling our friends from the international child rights organizations, that you cannot just bring an example of working, for instance, in Africa or in Asia or wherever, and then you just impose it or introduce it to Palestine. There should be more of context analysis, and I think there should be also some changes within such methodology. I am not an experienced psychologist, Omar, to tell you, but definitely there is such a concept that our children, they are living in a continuous trauma. It's not just a post-traumatic stress disorders. And I mean, I have a child who's now 28 years old, and he was also diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorders. He was not, I mean, imprisoned. He was not, I mean, none of us was killed, etc., etc. But despite that, he has a trauma, just like, I mean, the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, they have the same symptoms. But yes, this is something unusual, and there should be also unusual practices how to deal with such cases.
Thank you. What kind and level of mental health support are available in Gaza and other territories?
Yeah, there are programs in Gaza and also in the West Bank. I don't think they can cover all children, but I know of programs that they introduced recreational activities for children. And of course, some there are therapeutic nature. But this kind of recreational programs for children in Gaza, you know, once I read a research conducted by Omar, you know her definitely, Cairo Arafat. She did a research on Palestinian children in Gaza. And in this research, she found that if a child in Gaza ever attended one recreational event where, for instance, gouache colors will be put on their faces, or play in I don't know what, it has a meaning for this child. Try to imagine how little our expectations are, and the expectations of our children. Participating in one event, going on a picnic, or do whatever, I mean, a singing party or whatever, this has an effect on Palestinian children. So there are some programs, but definitely they are not enough. In the West Bank, I think we have more programs. I mean, I ran one of such programs, the YMCA rehabilitation program, and we tried to do our best dealing with children, but I think we need more of professional type of help.
Does Hamas or the government in Gaza ask on behalf of children to have the UN human rights organizations to intervene?
You know, Hamas, I mean, yeah, sometimes they issue calls that UN international organizations should intervene. But in general, this is the Palestinian Authority responsibility. I mean, honestly, I don't have enough information about how Gaza is run, but I know from some experiences that international organizations, sometimes they found it difficult to work due to the security, I mean, situation in Gaza, due to the continuous shelling of Gaza, to poverty of Gaza. I mean, we should not forget that according to UN reliable sources, that Gaza is not livable anymore. And in the coming 4 or 5 years, Gaza will be, completely unlivable. And despite that, still people live there. So try to imagine 98% of their water is not drinkable, is not, you cannot even wash yourself with such water. So try to imagine the kind of lives these people in Gaza they are living.
There's a question. Somebody from the audience is saying, we happened to see the documentary Born in Gaza this week. Very powerful story. I don't know if you have seen it, Rifat.
No, I haven't.
Of one children?
No, I haven't. I Born in Gaza. I will look for it. Sorry, I did not see it.
Neither have I. So here's another question is, although it's not very much on the topic, but it is somebody's asking, why does President Abbas not resign and let a younger person take over? He does not hold elections. He works with Israel security and arrests Palestinians. When Palestinian workers went on strike for 1 day, why does he not hold elections? Since 2006, no elections. Why? Until there is an election and we know democratically who has won, these discussions are pointless. Israel, the EU, and the Americans will say there is no democratic party to deal with.
Yeah. This is very complicated question, although it is said in an easy way. But the latest elections were postponed. We are almost sure of that. The main political faction, Fatah, the faction of the president, was about to lose. So this is why the elections were postponed. Also, I should say that today the political, the Palestinian Authority, they represent also a economic social class. And this social economic class, whether we like it or not, they're also benefiting from the status quo. So it is not anymore that just a political party running the show, but it is also an economic class with interests and economic interests. Why shouldn't the president resign? Today there was an article, I don't know, Omar, if you have read it, asking the same question and even giving a free of charge advice to the president that he should resign and give the chance for a more unity leadership to emerge, including young people, women and men. And this is, I think, one of the immediate results of what's have been happening in Sheikh Jarrah, Jerusalem, but also in Gaza and in some other places in the West Bank. Today, there are more young people taking to the streets, taking more leadership roles. And for many of us, these are signs of hope that contradict completely all the Zionist narrative when Golda Meir said the old people will forget, will die, and the young people will forget. So such leadership, such young people, they are coming to prove them wrong, that our young people are not forgetting and they are still ready to sacrifice. They are ready to enroll and engage in the struggle, seeking their freedom. It will come, I would say. It will come that a new leadership would emerge. I hope it will emerge non-violently. I hope it will emerge by election. But if not, nature cannot accept this stalemate thing, and things will be happening. I pray and hope that there will be change soon in the leadership, because we need new blood. I mean, just to tell you, I mean, a story happened to me. I mean, some months back, young people from my town, Beit Sahur, I mean, they have this youth movement, as in many places. So they wanted to talk to me to seek my advice on some things. And I told them the only advice I have to you is not to take any advice from me or from any of my generation. Make it yourself, do it yourself, create your own experience, the same way we did. I mean, when we were young, we also contradicted our father, our parents, and we created our own experience. We created our own space. And this is, I think, what our young people is doing right now. I mean, we have brilliant young people. I mean, many of us, we thought that this is the end of the Palestinian cause. We felt that young people are not interested, frustrated, disappointed, etc. But when it comes to show, I mean, the seriousness of this generation to fight for their dignity, for their human rights, they took to the streets and they took a real leadership role. I am full of hope and optimism about the future.
Thank you, Rifat. And thank you all for the questions, and thank you for the great responses, Rifat. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer every question today. Now let's move on to advocacy time. Ryan, could you please put on the option on the screen? Thank you, Ryan. These options will also be shared in chat, and all of the text is available on the web page for this gathering. Also shared in the chat or accessible from the kuminow.com homepage under the Kumi Online Gatherings section near the bottom of this page. So today's Kumi action, which you can see on the left, is to find respectful ways to share the images and stories of the children who have lost their lives at the hands of the occupation. You can share these photos however you see fit. You can do them by email, social media, printing them and hanging them on the wall in the church, as you see fit. Rifat Kassis, do you have any thoughts on what advocacy our viewers should engage in at this moment?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't want to sound classic in this, but we need to distribute this alternative information to others. We need to try to write to editors of the newspapers. And I felt that in the latest war, there were such incidents where, I mean, people wrote to the editors to the level that they change even the way they describe the situation on the ground. So writing to editors, writing to your parliamentarians, writing to your heads of churches, all this would help. And I would say also act non-violently, practice BDS against Israel until it complies with international law. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions are some of the few non-violent measures left to the Palestinians and their supporters to bring about justice to the both nations in this conflict. So this is what I can recommend, Omar.
Thank you, Rifat. And there was a great news that Malala Yousafzai has donated over or $150,000 for children in Gaza, including $25,000 to DCI Palestine, which is wonderful. So we're also asking you now in the coming 5 minutes, please write an email just thanking DCI for their work at advocacy@dcips.org. Just say that you've been part of a lecture, a session, you've listened about the work of DCI, and just words of encouragement. They mean a lot to the. So the email is advocacy@dcips.org. So please just few lines, make it personal, encourage others to write them. These emails mean a lot. And Rifat, it's also good to also send an email yourself.
I will.
Okay, so we will give you few minutes just to write an email. We find it usually very helpful, Rifat, doing it while we're having the session, because otherwise people can put it on their to-do list and it takes much more time.
Perfect. Yeah, good.
Yes, I mean, Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. A link to a video of along with all the links shared today will be available on the Kumi Now website and on YouTube in a day or so. And it will be shared in the next newsletter. You can subscribe to Kumi Now on YouTube and subscribe to our newsletter to make sure you receive them. We would greatly appreciate if you shared this amazing session with your friends and colleagues, as well as information on our future sessions. I'd like to thank you, Rifat, for being with us today. Thank you for your time and for your work. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with? One second, Rifat. You have been muted. Yes, could you please unmute?
Yeah. No, I just want to thank you, Omar, for this opportunity, and I would like also to thank our friends who put time to attend this session, and please do remember that to bring about justice in any place, we need really to act together and to work together. So I hope this presentation today would encourage us more to do whatever we can to give hope for the children in Palestine and also for the children in Israel. And thank you.
Thank you. Next week, we will be looking at the environmental effects of the occupation. If you'd like to be reminded of the online gathering an hour before they begin, you can register or email reminders at kumi.com/online using the form at the bottom of the page. We hope to see you back next week. Thank you again and good night. Thank you very much, Rifat. Thank you, friends.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.